This week on Behind the Pulpit. In case you missed it, this past Sunday was the Super Bowl. We give our thoughts on the game and talk about a few commercials, including one that has a lot of Christians talking.
The ad is targeted toward a more progressive audience based on who's getting their feet washed, right? So the problem then comes is, well, how does that particular progressive audience define the word hate? The progressive side of the culture has defined hate as not affirming every kind of lifestyle that's chosen. If that's the definition of hate, if I need to affirm your lifestyle for me to not hate you, then I guess I hate, according to your definition. But that's where I think the commercial got into trouble there.
Also today we answer a few of your questions, including one that we use as a theology sprint, and we spend a good amount of time talking about Pastor Dave's sermon from Luke chapters 9 and 10, where he talks about what it means to be a follower of Jesus.
Following Jesus requires us to be long-suffering. What did you mean by that?
Well, you know how sometimes I really annoy you? You need to be more patient.
You need to be long-suffering, and you pointed right to me.
And we may even have a peaceful discussion about books.
Great recommendation.
Boom.
He kept it to one, folks. This is very good.
If something happens
doing
later,
well.
I have another one too.
Something happens.
Wherever you may be watching or listening to this today, we hope you're having a wonderful day. Sit back, relax, and enjoy this week's edition of Behind the Pulpit.
Hey, welcome to Behind the Pulpit for President's Day. It is February 19th, 2024. We're so glad you're joining us today. My name is Bob Urbig. I'm one of the pastors here at Millington Baptist Church. I'm joined to my left by my esteemed colleague. Oh, there you are.
I'm right over here, Bob.
My hand in the...
I'm with you, man.
That's how close we are.
Dave Henschel, Pastor of Spiritual Formation and Care. Good to be with you guys today.
In the flesh today.
President's Day.
We're so glad you're here. President's Day. President's Day. So, President's Day, a lot of people taking off of work. Today, banks are closed. And who are the presidents that we remember on President's Day? Was it Lincoln and Washington? Right? Lincoln, Washington?
I believe those are the two that we typically honor.
Yeah.
President's Day weekend.
It's their birthdays, right? President's Day is Lincoln's birthday, Washington's birthday. Man, I'm forgetting my elementary school days, putting to shame my New Jersey education right here. But anyway, President's Day. Hopefully you go out and get a sale for whatever store you prefer today. We're so glad you're joining us today. Pastor Dave, how are you doing?
Doing just fine. It's a little cold for my taste, but I'm
It's
okay.
It's a little chilly outside.
I'm not going to be doing too many walks outside today or things like
No?
that. No.
What about a run? You go out and jog and get your blood flowing?
I'll do a little theology sprinting. That's about it.
All right. Maybe we can take the theology sprint on the road. We can answer a question as we're walking. We got to work that in here one of these days, Tim. We can actually sprint.
That's a creative idea.
What if we actually sprinted and tried to answer a question at the end?
You know what?
That's creative.
We should try that.
It's creative. All right. Well, hey, we got a couple things coming up in the life of the church. Those of you that are watching that are from our church, let's let you know about some things that are happening out there. We are only a month away from our Underground Sessions event with Christopher Yuan. Theme is holy sexuality. We're talking about same-sex attraction, gender identity, some really relevant topics. If you want to know more about that, Christopher Yuan has a really powerful testimony. Actually, this is a Sunday night, so it's a little different than when we normally do Underground. He and his mother are going to be doing a testimony in the services in the morning, both at 9 and 10:45, and talking about him coming to faith, his mother's prayer role in that, and I think a lot of people will be blessed, and then he'll come back and talk about those topics in the evening using his expertise. A couple things I need you to do. Number one, please go and register. Register because we are going to be providing food for you. Dinner is going to be available starting at 5 o'clock on that night, and then the actual event with him doing his presentations will begin at 6 p.m., so sign up, let us know you're coming so we have enough food to feed you and you don't go home hungry on that evening. Childcare is also available, so let us know about that when you register for that.
Is there a cost?
There is a $5 cost to help us offset the cost of the food. So make sure you do that when you sign up.
What if I already signed up and I didn't pay my cost yet? Can I go back and pay?
We are going to send Noah after you. He's going to run you down because he's really fast. If you didn't pay before you signed up, we'll have a registration table at the actual event, or you can go back into Realm, and I believe you can pay that way. So anyway, so glad we're
reserve your spot. It's going to be a great
excited that
night.
it's going to be a lot of people. We already have like 75 people signed up, and we're a month out. So that's high numbers. That's high intro numbers, Pastor Dave.
It is.
I'm thinking we're going to be topping 200 at this event.
Wow. Let's do it. It's going to be a great night.
Make it happen.
Looking forward to it.
Make it happen.
Was this Rachel's old professor? Did I hear that?
Rachel did go to Moody
Moody?
Bible Institute where he has taught, and I believe she had a class with him. So she's very excited to see him
Yeah.
again. We'll see if he remembers her
It's going to be great.
back in the day. All right, so that's number one. Second thing, we are just 5 weeks out from Easter. Easter is going to be March 31st. Services are at 9 and 10:45. We have a whole weekend of things planned. A little different than we've done Easter in the last couple of years. Everything's happening on Easter weekend. Easter is early this year. This is about the earliest that Easter will be. It rotates around. So March 31st, invite your friends. We're going to be talking about the Emmaus Road from Luke 24, I believe, as we're going through Luke. There you go. We're going to be on the road with Jesus, and Jesus getting on the road after he's out of the tomb. Also on that weekend, we got some exciting things. Do you want me to keep going, or do you want to mention the other exciting things?
Well, I
You're
think
jumping out of your seat over
one
there,
of the
Pastor
things
Dave.
that's unique this year is instead of a Maundy Thursday service, we're actually going to be having a Good Friday
Good
service.
Friday.
And we're going to be celebrating Messiah and the Passover with a special guest. Dr. Mitch Glazier will be here from Chosen People Ministries, explaining the significance of the Exodus and the Passover from the Old Testament and how Christ has fulfilled the Exodus here in the New Covenant. And so we're looking forward to having him present. It's going to be a great night. We hope that you'll join us for a special Holy Good Friday service, Holy Weekend services.
Boom.
That weekend, we're also having our family event, the hair-raising egg party. So Saturday, March 30th, it's going to be 10 to 12, and there's a VIP portion at 9:30 a.m. So that's going to be a great morning. So bring your kids, bring your grandkids, bring your neighbors' kids. We hope that you'll join us for the hair-raising egg party. That is a great event to invite your friends.
That is a great event to invite your friends.
So
There's
we're
gonna be
trying
lots of-
to
It's
create-
a party.
Yeah.
Who doesn't want to go to a party?
Yeah. So that's a good opportunity for you to be a witness to your neighbors, to your friends, to those who may have little kids who would enjoy a great event. So we will promise to take good care of them. So it's coming up.
Awesome. We hope to see you there. All right, so that's the announcements we have. Now it's time to move into our next segment that's gaining in popular attraction. It is the Great Book War segment, and it is my turn to recommend a book this week. Pastor Dave reminded me, and I went up and found a few on my bookshelf. Dave, I have two here. But I've been told I can only recommend...
Is anyone surprised by that?
I can only recommend one. So I'm going to let you tell me which one you want me to recommend. Of these two that are in front of me, which one is more appealing to you so that I can recommend it? So I'm going to involve you in the war here. This is the white flag I'm raising.
Wow. This is so cooperative and collaborative. This is the PLT power here.
Here it is.
So I am going to go ahead and choose the Nabil Qureshi book.
I knew you were going to pick that one.
You did?
Nabil Qureshi. If you have not read this book, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, this is the autobiography of Nabil Qureshi. He was an apologist who came to faith, grew up Muslim, and he had a friend who witnessed to him over many, many years, sharing with him about the truth of Christianity. They went back and forth, they debated. So if you have somebody who you've been witnessing to and they just have been resistant and you've been trying your hardest, let this book just be an encouragement to you. And also, at the end, he tells this whole story about how he came to faith through some miraculous, I think, circumstances. It's really powerful. I invite you to check it out. It's going to give you some tips on how to share your faith with your Muslim friends in particular, but also it's just a great book for evangelism and an encouragement in general. So, Seeking Allah, Finding Jesus, a devout Muslim encounters Christianity. It is a page-turner. It is worth your read, so pick this one up.
Great recommendation.
Boom.
He kept it to one, folks. This is
I did.
very good.
If something happens
doing
later,
well.
I have another one too.
Something happens. Awesome.
All right, so that's the book recommendation, Pastor Dave. Have you read this book? It's
I
pretty
have
popular.
read portions of it.
Okay.
I haven't finished it yet.
500,000 copies in print. So, I can
good stuff.
I can loan it to you if you want to read it.
Yeah, I know where to find it if I'm needing another book from you.
There we go. All right. So that is the Great Book War segment. Next segment is our In the News. All right, Pastor Dave, there was something that happened last week that really a lot of people watched, and I've heard people call it the last. It's almost like the American religious experience is happening now. Do you know what I'm talking about?
You know, honestly, my sister-in-law and brother-in-law were over the house for the Super Bowl, and they walked in the door, and you know what she said? She goes,
What'd she say?
"I'm here for the Usher concert."
Okay. Sure. I hear he's a pretty good dancer.
Well, I don't know.
So
During the halftime show, I went to go check my email or something. So I wasn't
I'll
that
bet you
interested
did.
in that. But it was a
halftime shows can
only
be
the
pretty
second
scandalous.
time ever that I think the Super Bowl went into overtime.
It did.
And this
The
year was
Chiefs-
a new rule, and I was a little confused by it. I don't know, Tim, if you were like expecting that, but even though it used to be
I
like
think the
sudden
49ers
death,
were confused by it as well.
it seems like they didn't have the right strategy there. So the Chiefs opted to let them have the ball. So it's not sudden death in the sense that if the first team were to score, the other team gets a chance to have an opportunity there too. So that was a new rule, and the Chiefs took full advantage of that rule.
Yeah,
So,
it's all very confusing because I think a couple years ago in the playoffs when the Bills played the Chiefs and the Chiefs got the ball first and won in overtime, all the Bills were really upset. Like, we should have had a chance to score. We should have a chance
Right.
to score. So what the NFL did is they changed the rule in the playoffs. Regular season, they didn't change
just
the
the
rule.
playoffs.
Right.
So
But the Chiefs had talked about a strategy throughout the season. They were very prepared for such a scenario. I think maybe more prepared than the Niners, and so that's why the Chiefs did things the way they did it.
The Niners weren't prepared at all. They said in the press conference afterwards that they had no plan. They had not even talked about the idea of it possibly going into overtime.
Yeah,
That's
So
crazy.
it made for an exciting game. I mean, Super
did.
Bowl tie score at the end and overtime, and the Chiefs were there. My predictions were not true about the great engagement between Kelsey and
there
Swift.
was an embrace though.
There was
wasn't
an embrace. They were
Okay.
definitely,
Apparently, Usher got married after the game.
Is that right?
Apparently, I think I saw that he and his longtime partner got married in Vegas after
interesting.
after his halftime
Well,
performance.
there's the news, I guess.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Whatever gets you there, I guess.
So good game.
so
Football's over.
just so I'm clear. So the rule that changed was it used to be that if you scored first, you just won.
Sudden death.
Sudden
Correct.
death.
Yeah.
If you
Okay.
score a touchdown first, not a field goal. If you score a field goal first, the other team still
interesting.
gets a chance.
Okay.
Yeah. It's
Okay.
a little bit confusing, but
All right. Well, it's done. It's over. No. So here's the reason I was mentioning it was the American religion. How many people watched the Super? I saw the Nielsen ratings were 154 million
No.
people watched.
really?
It was something like that.
Whoa.
So what else in American life can you get that many people watching one thing? It's like the last thing in American
Nothing.
life where everybody is watching one thing at the same time.
We had that many people
Yeah.
watching our live stream on Sunday.
That'd be crazy. But now you have all the streaming services. You know, if a show gets, I don't know, 3, 4, 5 million people, that's considered a success.
You got the Usher fans tuning in. You got the Taylor
Right.
Swifties.
Right, but
was a big audience.
Back in like the 70s or the 80s, you had only a couple channels. I think MASH, no, we're taking it back. MASH, like 90 million people watched the series finale of that show from
Is
the
that
60s.
right?
And you can never get that nowadays. Only the Super Bowl can get that.
You got some good statistics today.
I
Okay.
do. Maybe I'm inflating one or two, but I'm in the ballpark, Pastor Dave.
Wow.
All right, so we thought for In the News today, we're going to talk a little bit about, since everybody watched the Super Bowl commercials, and there was a couple that we wanted to draw your attention to. The first one, my favorite one, was the pickleball. I can't believe at the Super Bowl there was a commercial for pickleball. This is how crazy this thing is now. And what did they call it? They had little babies playing in the thing.
It was an insurance commercial, and they were playing pickleball, and they referred to it as wiffle tennis.
Wiffle tennis. All right, so there you go, Chris Dowd and wiffle tennis.
I thought that was pretty hysterical, too. I did LOL for real.
You did?
Yeah.
You did? No way.
Yes. Yeah, that
Oh,
was
my
a
goodness.
funny line.
I gave Tim an LOL the other day and let him know I actually chuckled at whatever it was that he sent me.
I laughed out loud because I forget. Whoops! I forget what we were. Sorry, people. I forget what we were texting about. But I sent something to Bob, and he LOL'd me, and then he in parentheses
sent me.
says,
It was a picture
I
of me.
Actually chuckled. Oh yeah, it was a picture.
Picture of me.
So
like,
Noah made
smashing
such a
things.
great video recapping our Act 2 series. You can't see him. He's over there. I'm pointing at him. And at one point,
Noah wave. Nobody can see you.
We were testing the audio before our Sunday service, and where I paused it, Bob had a look on his face like this.
Okay.
So I sent it to Bob and Noah, and I said, we got to use
That could
this
be your
somehow.
thumbnail for today. Make sure you take a picture
And I
of that.
said, Bob
on the live
smashed,
stream.
and he said, LOL, and in parentheses, I actually chuckled.
I thought about actually doing the LOL before I put it down. All right. So anyway, so that was
That's a good substitute.
that was that. Thanks for taking me off. So the other commercial that's been getting a lot of attention is the He Gets Us commercial, which has become kind of popular at some of these events. And this is I believe an attempt at doing some evangelism by buying advertising, and I'm not sure how much it's costing them, but it's a lot of money to run an ad at the Super Bowl. And this particular commercial garnered some controversy after the Super Bowl. Did you see it, Pastor Dave?
I did, and this campaign was part of the Super Bowl last year too. But this year, if you guys saw the ad, you remember. If you didn't see the ad, basically it was foot washing. And so what was interesting about this ad is there was Christians washing the feet of what you might call left-coded sinners. In other words, so you have a woman who had an abortion getting her feet washed, or you had a transgender person getting their feet washed, or you had an activist that's been lobbying for an ungodly cause getting their feet washed. So far, so good, because in John chapter 13, Jesus washed all their feet, including Judas, who,
Right.
was obviously going to be betraying Christ. So far, so good. But then at the very end of the commercial, it has this line, Jesus
didn't teach hate.
And then it says he washed feet, and then it says he gets us. And so that's where I had the problem with it, because
That's a bit of a loaded term today.
so you
What
can
does
see
that
like
mean?
the ad is targeted toward a more progressive audience, clearly based on who's getting their feet washed, right? So the problem then comes is, well, how does that particular progressive audience define the word hate? Because these words mean things, and it's kind of changed its meaning. And so the problem in our day is the progressive side of the culture has defined hate as not affirming every kind of lifestyle that's chosen. That's the definition
That's
of hate.
the thing nowadays, the morality.
Right.
Yeah.
So if that's the definition of hate, like if I need to affirm your lifestyle for me to not hate you, then it doesn't fit well for me. I guess I hate, according to your definition.
Right.
I don't think it's hate. But that's where I think the commercial got into trouble there with that
Yeah.
particular line.
So what
I'm practicing hate. We're practicing hate.
What it could implicitly be saying is that if you hold to certain convictions, no matter how loving you try to be in terms of communicating them, if you hold to a specific conviction, biblically speaking, it could be, from the culture, be seen as an act of hate.
And Jesus is, let's just not say we according to our convictions. Like Jesus's words in the Gospels would communicate things that our progressive culture would define as hate. So Jesus's definition of a marriage between a man and a woman, or Jesus's very strict standards for divorce, or Jesus's position on protecting life and valuing life, those things that Jesus taught about, our culture would consider those to be hateful. Now, Jesus is the embodiment of love, but yet he took positions on these things that our culture would not define as,
So we need
as
to.
loving.
You're saying is we need to define our terms nowadays, right?
We do.
I'll give you another example. So we put out these shorts on YouTube. I don't know if you're watching this, but you go on our channel, and we get a decent amount of people that have been watching these short videos we put out. So we did one, I think, last week on do all religions lead to God? How did you title it, Noah? I forget. Do all religions get saved? Right. And so in that particular one, it was me that was talking there. We were talking about the exclusive nature of the gospel and how the gospel can be offensive, and we got some hate mail over that one, I think.
Right. So our culture would
right.
define exclusivity as hate, or any kind of teaching of hell as
Right.
as hate.
And yet
And yet
we would
Jesus
say there's a
taught
very
that.
clear scriptural teaching on those things.
There is.
From Jesus.
It's unequivocal. So to hold to Jesus' teachings, or Jesus himself, according to our culture's definition of hate, would be guilty of hate. Now, Jesus, we believe, is love, and we don't think it's actually loving to affirm someone's lifestyle that's harming them or others. So we would have to redefine love as well. But that's, I think, where the Super Bowl commercial got into trouble. There was a second commercial that came out like 24 hours later. I think this came out of England somewhere. And I saw this and I was like, man, this thing is unbelievable. Whoever put this together, like, was Tim. They were sitting in front of their dashboard video editing software.
They had 10 screens
for like
Tim's got 4. They had 10.
You know, this took no time at all. And one day they had this other sort of replacement ad come out that talked about
Same people?
No, this was like a Christian video producer. I don't exactly know who, but it went viral because it had examples of people coming out of sin. So this, like Jeff Durbin, had former drug addict, came clean, and it had Rosaria Butterfield, was former lesbian activist.
Yes.
Now she's saved, and then the end of that particular replacement commercial was not just he gets us, but he saves us, he redeems us, he cleans us, and then it says, and then at the end it's like, and such were some of you, from 1 Corinthians.
Such were some of you,
6.
right? Yep.
So that was a really powerful sort of response to the He Gets Us campaign. I thought it was good, so I posted it on my page. But that's a little bit in the news. People are talking about it this week.
It's in the news. It's the proverbial water cooler. People are chatting
talking
about it. So check those out. Maybe we can put a link to that one you're talking about in our notes section there, Pastor Dave.
That we can do.
There we go.
That
Good.
we can do.
All right. So that was in the news.
Links
in the news.
are
In the
okay.
news. Thanks so much for taking part in that with us today. All right, next segment we're moving on is our questions segment. We do have some questions that came in. Thank you. Inquiring minds want to know, how do we wrestle with these difficult questions? How many do we get, Tim?
So we got 4, but we only
4?
have 2 today because, we can't.
We have a cap.
We have a cap. We're going to try to cap these at 2 questions per episode. But thank you for the other 2 of you that submitted questions. We're going to try to get to your questions in upcoming weeks.
I like how you looked right at the camera and like you were talking to them.
Yeah, man. I just feel like it's nice to...
It's so personal.
Hey, guys.
It was like you threw up the gang sign too there.
Not affiliated.
That's
with
what
any
happens
gangs.
when the White Tree of Gondor is behind you. We had a Lord of the Rings reference in the sermon this week, too, so...
I was very happy.
Yep.
All right, you guys ready for
I'm ready.
this
Questions.
question?
The questions.
Here we go.
Will we be married in heaven?
All right. It's a common question that's coming out.
Isn't interesting. Who's we there? But so actually, this is directly
assuming
addressed.
the person who's asking this is married. Am I going to be
right.
married to my spouse in heaven?
Right. The answer is no. Period. Full stop. Next question. No. There is a passage in Matthew 22. I'll just
Although we
read
do
it for
say
you.
it is kind of clear, yeah.
It is.
Yeah.
So this one's pretty clear. So Matthew 22, it says the Sadducees came up to Jesus saying there's no resurrection, and they said, "Teacher, Moses says if a man dies having no children, his brother must marry his widow, raise up kids." And there were 7 brothers. The first married and died with no kids. The second and third down to the 7th. After all them, the woman died. In the resurrection therefore of the 7, whose wife will she be? And so they're trying to trap Jesus with that question.
Mm-hmm.
Jesus answers them saying this: "You are wrong because you know neither the scriptures nor the power of God. For in the resurrection they neither marry nor are they given in marriage, but they're like the angels in heaven." And then he goes on to talk about, have you not read, which is a powerful, I think, testimony of Jesus' affirmation of the scriptures. But Jesus is pretty clear that marriage
Right.
is something that's earthly and that it's temporary and that one day it will be no more, nor will we have further children in heaven
Right.
either. So
Right.
this is something that will discontinue. I think you were mentioning that John Piper wrote about this a little bit.
I think in his book Future Grace, he's got a chapter on this, or at least a few sections on it. So, yeah.
So for those of us who are married, our sisters in Christ will one day be our wonderful friends in heaven, our wonderful, co-kingdom inhabitants together, but we won't have the covenant of marriage anymore. And the significance of that is that marriage in the earthly realm is pointing us toward
Right.
something wonderful in the heavenly realm.
Marriage can bring heaven to earth, and then when you're in heaven, it discontinues.
Right.
Yeah.
So the shadow of heaven will one day become obsolete and disappear.
So there you go.
All right, next question. I'm ready for this too.
My Bible footnotes say some manuscripts add to Luke 9:56, "For the Son of Man has not come to destroy people's lives, but to save them." Why don't they just add this to the verse? Why keep it a footnote?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Your Bible takes the position that that was not originally part of Luke's gospel. I have that here. And it seems like one of the things I do when I find textual problems is look them up in Metzger's textual commentary, and it says this: the addition
look
of
at him
those
hiding
verses.
the second book behind the bigger one.
Yeah,
he's using two.
I got two. Those additional verses are somewhat less well attested, and so what this means is in our oldest manuscripts, we don't find those verses there. So that's why they footnote them, because they don't believe, in their best judgment, they were original to the Gospel of Luke. And you can kind of see where those verses came from, because Matthew has a parallel passage where James and John say, "Call down fire from heaven," and Jesus says, "You don't know what spirit you're of." And so someone's importing Matthew's language into Luke's gospel there in the similar account. That doesn't mean Jesus didn't say that. It's just that Luke didn't record that here. And then the other part of that little section is a copy over from Luke 19, where it says he came to seek and to save the lost. And so you can see how those corruptions came in, but they don't seem like they were original.
Right.
So that's why your Bible footnotes
it's not
them.
just Luke 9:56. I mean, there's a number of other examples. I mean, probably the more controversial one is John 8, right? Well-known story about the woman caught in adultery.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't think that should be in the Bible,
Right.
and yet some include it.
Exactly. So, the Bible is trustworthy, but we do know that human error did come into play in some cases, but we can, with our best judgment and the over 5,000 manuscripts, really determine what is the most likely reading for the original Gospel of Luke. So hopefully that helps answer your question.
And if you really want to get your PhD in textual criticism, you might join the ranks of the few, the proud, the Marines that did that, and maybe write your own commentary.
Will, come in handy. So
learn the textual apparatus in the UBS right there. So
excellent.
That's sort of what you were talking about a couple weeks ago with like the differences between like the King James version and stuff, right? Like the King James or the New King James would probably have that in there as opposed to like the ESV or the NIV, right?
Right. I'd have to look that particular verse up, but generally, yes. Yeah. So
cool.
Yeah, in terms of how closely they're translating it.
Yeah. Good question, though.
Good.
And I'm glad you're reading your Bibles and your footnotes, which is awesome.
Look at that. Thanks so much for writing in. That's amazing. Boom. All right, so we are now on the sermon portion of our show today. Pastor Dave, you were preaching the end of Luke chapter 9 into Luke chapter 10.
Two chapters.
Little similar passage to what we talked about the week before. There was some sending out, there was lightning in heaven and Satan falling and people following Jesus. Some similarities from the week before. So could you give us a quick summary about what you covered, and then we can maybe talk about a few specific questions.
Okay, yeah, sure. Very similar to the passage of sending out the 12, but it's grown. So in this particular passage, Jesus is now on the road. Luke 9:51 is the hinge, the transition verse of the Gospel of Luke. He is now setting his face like flint to go to Jerusalem. And then we as the readers are going on that journey with him. Stop number 1 was in Samaria. They did not accept him. James and John say, "Let's call down fire from heaven." Jesus turns and rebukes them, says, it's not time for that. Today's the day of mercy. From there, 3 different individuals come up and say, "We will follow you." Jesus actually shows them how they're using convenient excuses and calls them to a greater level of cost and discipleship. And then Jesus gathers together 72 and sends them out 2 by 2 to spread the good news of the kingdom of God in Luke chapter 10. They return rejoicing, saying, "This is great. Awesome things are happening. Even the demons submit to us." And Jesus says, "That's wonderful, but let me tell you what you should really rejoice in. Rejoice that your names are written in the book of heaven." This brings them great joy, and it says that Jesus has great joy as well in his mission to seek and to save the lost. So that's the passage.
That's great. Well, it's worth noting we're now in Act 3 of our Luke series. We're now going on the road with Jesus. That's the
travel
theme for this one. The travelogue. So Jesus is going to be walking to Jerusalem for about 10 chapters or so here. And I was thinking as you were talking that maybe this is Jesus beginning his theology stroll.
Jesus did this theology
Jesus did the
stroll before
theology
we ever
stroll.
thought of it.
That's right. He was the theology.
He was teaching on the road.
He was
Are we
teaching on the road.
rebranding? Are we calling it the stroll now?
I think.
Well, I'm just saying, I'm not sure that Jesus
the way we've been
sprinted to
answering these
Jerusalem.
questions has been slow.
He's taken his time. He's not sprinting to Jerusalem.
Yeah,
but you did make the point of saying that along this way, expect there to be less crowds. It's going to be more of like a seminar class with Jesus,
in depth,
talking,
one-on-one
parables, teaching his disciples, preparing them for his departure, telling them that he's going to die.
Yeah.
And if they're going to follow him, this is what it's going to cost.
Yeah, so we get to come into the inner circle there and
Very
walk
much
with
so.
him.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about some of the things that you brought up here. So you had three main points. The first one was talking about following Jesus requires us to be long-suffering.
Mm-hmm.
Long-suffering. What did you mean by that? What are some of the undergirding things? How can we be long-suffering in following Jesus?
Yeah. Well, you know how sometimes I really annoy you? You need to be more patient.
You need to be long-suffering, and you pointed right to me.
When I'm always making fun of your books, you got to be patient with your other brothers who are sometimes difficult.
A longer fuse, that's what it means.
I mean, James and John had a legit case. The people in Samaria, they rejected Christ, and so they thought, let's bring the fire.
That was a very interesting textual thing. Like, let's just like
destroy
Thor,
them
bring down
now.
the lightning from heaven.
Right. This is what they think they're doing, the sons of thunder. But Jesus turns and rebukes them, which is, I think, something we can relate to. We might be right at being frustrated with someone else's sin or, behaviors, or we might be frustrated with the world or the way the country is right now. But Jesus turns and rebukes us and reminds us that we have to be long-suffering because he's long-suffering. And so that's a challenge. So the challenge there was like, who is it in your life that is requiring you to be long-suffering this week? And let's try to obey God and follow Jesus on the road in that way.
Do you think is that something that is being lost culturally speaking? Like, are we losing the ability to be long-suffering in our daily lives because we live in an instant society? It's always telling us we need things right now. Is that something you notice? And is that you think Jesus is speaking to that here?
Well, we certainly want things done instantly. And in addition to that, I think we're quick to call out and give voice to our frustrations right now in a way that is not very long-suffering. So we're quick to cancel. We're quick to
quick to cancel.
Quick to voice our opinions. We're quick to throw some shade on social media. We're quick to express the judgment that we have towards other people and their behaviors, whatever they may be.
What is the action for throwing shade? Is that throwing shade? You're canceling?
Yeah, something like that.
Are you asking if there's a physical?
What do the Gen Z people do with the throwing the shade? How do they?
I don't know if anyone. Noah, what do you think? Do we still throw shade?
Is that what's behind the reverse mullet that you were talking about before? There's shade over the eye.
Yes, that's physical shade. For those of you who don't know what the reverse mullet is in like people younger than me. There's a very popular hairdo popularized.
Are you the cutoff? You never had a reverse mullet?
I have the proper mullet. I have the lettuce we call it in the back. They have it.
You know when the mullet started in the '80s, man. You bring in the '80s back. Grow your mullet like it's 1984.
I don't think we quote unquote throw flow shade.
In order to do
I've
the
had
reverse
some
mullet,
real
I would have to
serious
start
mullets.
growing my hair like way
pictures.
back here and push it.
You just
forward.
put some Rogaine on the back and see what happens.
It would just be really ridiculous.
But there's definitely no hand motion. Like we go out and like I'm gonna throw some shade.
All right, no,
Throw some shade
none of
at
this. None of this.
No.
Okay.
Every time I try to be cool and up to date, it just doesn't work. I'm going to stop trying that.
At some
Sorry
point, you
about
just
that.
stop. You stop doing it.
Just
There's
stop.
an age you get. You
Just
can't
stop.
Just
can't
be
do it.
yourself.
Stop it.
There you go. All right, let's talk about the middle section here. You had some images. I will say I was a little disappointed. I didn't get any images on the screen of emotional Eddie and divided Dan and all that. But
that would have been better with images.
So
characters like cartoons or something.
Yeah. So what did you mean by emotional
Emojis.
Emotional Eddie? Like just like Eddie who cries all the time, or how do those relate to? I don't know what I just did.
Sorry.
I guess
I'm not saying
I made
it's
you
not-
think of something here.
Crying is fine. It's totally appropriate. I don't mean to say emotions are not
I
good.
cried a few weeks ago in that sermon, and they put it in the front.
Yeah, sorry. Emotions are God's good gifts to us. We're emotional creatures. God is
All the emotional people out there just got upset.
They did. So I was searching for the right word. I think you had suggested maybe experiential Eddie or enthusiastic Eddie.
Millennial Eddie.
The idea behind Eddie, and you can't tell from his statement, the idea there is, because Jesus knows the heart, is that sometimes we get really fired up and we're overcommitting to something we really haven't taken a step back and counted the cost about. So we're like, yeah, sign me up. Let's go. Let's do this. I'm in, man. Let's roll. But hold on.
Right.
Like, just so you know, you're committing to follow a homeless man, and this commitment could result in a significant cost in your life.
Maybe
That's
it should have been
Eddie.
false start Eddie, because sometimes like they just get. We know
False
people
start,
like this. They get fired up, they're ready to
defense,
go, and then they get
5-yard
about 10
penalty.
minutes in. It's like, oh, this is too hard. I'm done.
Right.
I can't do it.
Right. Yeah, I compared emotional Eddie to that one particular soil in Luke 8. And Noah, you
Yeah.
had mentioned
That's
this
a good
parallel that like
example.
the soils sometimes they don't take root. Eddie doesn't have the roots really to follow through on what he's saying he can do. So Jesus is calling him to a deeper
Yeah.
commitment there. Yeah.
He's saying, come on, let's go. Let's
Foxes have holes, birds have nests. You know, we don't
Yeah.
have anywhere to sleep at night. So Eddie needed to know that.
True. All right, so second person was procrastinating Peter, and I think we all have experienced that. We might be procrastinating Peter, and I loved how you drew out the cultural
Speak for
background of that.
yourself.
What am I speaking for myself about?
Procrastination.
Oh, okay. Gotcha.
No, I procrastinate too. It's just, I think different people
I thought you were
procrastinate
talking
about
about-
different things.
I thought you were talking about... I was starting to talk about drawing out the cultural significance of the thing. I got confused.
You can draw whatever cultural significance you want. I don't do that.
Well, anyway, so the you really helped us understand the phrase of
Oh, that's
the dead bury the
confusing.
dead, right? So you think like, all right, just go to the funeral.
Yeah,
Let's
Jesus
go.
is like, follow me, and he's like, well, first I got to go bury my father. And Jesus is like,
this
"No,
could-
you don't have. There's no time for that.
Right.
Like, what do you mean there's no time for that? So it seems like
Right.
in our contextualized
this
understanding
was helpful.
that like this guy's dad died that morning, and he's got a corpse at his house, and then he like runs into Jesus at lunchtime. And Jesus is like, follow me. He's like, well, first I just got to take care of my father's like dead body. And Jesus is like, no, you got to leave it there. That's really not what's going on. That's not what's going on.
Put it in modern terms. So Jesus comes to you, and your parents are what, like in their 60s.
Yeah, or even
Right.
I said even 50s. Like, so your dad wants you to take over.
Like somebody
the
comes to your daughter
hardware
right
store
now.
company, and you are planning as your dad retires, you're planning to take over the business, and then you're going to be the owner of the hardware company, and then eventually your dad's going to die. You're going to take care of him. And then after that, the guy's like, when I'm done with my whole life, and then I'm kind of ready to follow you, that's when I'm going to make my commitment. Jesus is like, no.
Yeah.
If you want to follow me, you got to follow me now. And that's always true. Whether you are in the middle of a business or in any circumstance, there's always an opportunity to follow Christ now, today.
I think Luke does a great job of emphasizing that, you know, in various ways. It is a daily, like even in the Luke 9:23-27, it's a daily commitment to die to yourself, to deny yourself, take up your cross and follow him. Like it needs to be a continual action of what we do. So it seems like that's a theme that he drives home, even in these little cultural background idioms that he's bringing up.
Yeah. And we all have a tendency to delay obeying God and what he's calling us to do.
Yeah.
So Christ calls us to obey him now.
Yeah.
Today is the day of
We
salvation.
like to build our kingdoms.
Now is the acceptable time. Follow Christ now.
Yeah.
If you want to follow me, it's got to be now.
So the third one was divided Dan, and is this where you talked about the family divisions?
Yeah.
So
This
tell
was
us
a
a bit
hard
about
word.
divided Dan here.
I'll tell you, I was uncomfortable with this section. I'm just being real.
Mm.
Jesus' words made me uncomfortable, but I don't want to change Jesus' words. I'm just going to let him sit there. And he basically says, follow me. And then this particular person says, first, let me go say goodbye, say my farewells to my family of origin. And Jesus was like, well, you can't like look back. You gotta look forward. That's hard because I love my family and I value my family. So it's a really important part of my life, my wife, my children. At times it seems like this is something that God really wants me to focus on. So what does Jesus mean?
Right, is he saying that we should neglect our obligations to our family
it seems
today?
like that's what he's saying. That can't be right.
Okay. Like I shouldn't feed my kids.
That's right. That can't be. That can't be that. But it seems like it, and so you have to unpack it based on like reading everything else Jesus said, which is it's a good thing to be married. It's a good thing to, pursue children. If God calls you to do that, these can be very wonderful, good gifts. But if our biological families become the center, and family becomes everything, over and above our commitment to God, our commitment to Christ. Well, that can actually become a stumbling block. I remember you used the word a barrier. That can become a barrier to me following Christ and what he's calling me to do. And so what I said was actually if you put Christ at the center, you're going to be a better spouse. You're going to be a better parent. You're going to be a better child. You're not going to be looking to your family to be the source of all you need in life because they can't provide that for you.
Right.
I love my wife, but she's not God. She loves me. I'm a lousy God. So we have to put Christ in his proper place. I got an amen from Bob. See, what I'm saying is true. And I think when we line up our lives correctly, our families actually work better that way. So there's a similar story in the Old Testament where Abraham's called to sacrifice Isaac.
Right.
It's like, well, wait, sacrifice Isaac. What God was calling him to do was sacrifice the idol in his heart that was Isaac and put him in his proper place.
You know what? So I was doing I remember sophomore year in high school in a literature class. I got in this fight with this guy over the Abraham
Here's
passage.
where the love of books started, right there.
I guess
sophomore year of high school literature
Billy
class.
Budd, Herman Melville.
Oh.
A few different books. Anyway,
Moby Dick.
Anyway, we were talking about I think the allusions in some of the literature, and the Abraham and Isaac passage came up, and this one guy was really upset. Like, how could God do that? Like, why would? So it's a very visceral reaction when we talk about family and giving that up to follow Jesus. Like, why would Jesus call us to do that?
Right. To call back to our other in the news segment, it seems like hate.
It does.
But Jesus said, actually, your love for me will be so pure and so important and so big that your affection for the other relationships in your life may seem like hate in comparison. Yeah. And so this is what the high calling of Christ is, that we're to put him first.
There it is. Hey, one more question.
Is there an Abraham, Isaac image in Moby Dick? Oh, he has the call me Ishmael thing. Is that what you're talking about?
I don't remember exactly. It may have been that. I
Call
remember
me
going
Ishmael.
through. I don't know if we did Moby Dick that year, but we did the other one. There's a smaller short story that he does that I think has some of those images. The Herman Melville. I'll have to go look it up now.
True confession, I never finished Moby Dick. There's that one chapter that's like just about the anatomy of whales. It's so boring.
I know. Well, that
I did see the movie though.
That year, I remember we did. It was American literature, so like the Scarlet Letter. I think maybe it was Billy Budd, but I think there was also a short story, and then a few other ones that were in there that were prominent that year. So anyway, so last question here. I don't know if you did much study on this, but the end of in Luke 10, when he's sending out the 72, he talks about seeing Satan fall like lightning from heaven. Mm-hmm. And what's that all about?
Commentators ask, when is that all about? In other words,
given the call for the dragon.
What
in Revelation
exactly
12.
is he talking about? Is he talking about something that occurred in real time when the 72 were out doing their ministry? Or is he looking back to the past? And most commentators will say he's looking backwards to that time where Satan was once an angel of light in heaven and then was cast down like lightning from heaven, from glory to corruption, from the place of honor to the place of dishonor. Christ remembers that fall. And so they're out there doing ministry in his name, casting out demons in his name. And he says, yeah, that's something. Let me tell you what I've seen. I've seen Satan fall like lightning from heaven.
Is there any parallelism with the James and the John when they're talking about calling down fire from heaven? Or no, are those completely separate?
I'd have to do some study on that. That's a really good question. Oh, one of the things you told me to take this out because it's kind of in the weeds, is like why 72? So there's different views on that. Here's for you weedy people. So 72 could be symbolic of the nations in Genesis chapter 10. And so Christ symbolically is taking back the nations, and he is He's going to
Interesting.
win back all of the nations under God's rule that were split apart and delegated to the different gods in Genesis chapter 10, if you take the view that the nations were delegated by the different sons of God there, it says. So that's one view. My view, which I just decided it's my view a couple days ago.
Okay. All right.
Reading is your passage. You remember you said there was parallels?
Yes.
Your passage,
yes.
he sends out 12.
Right.
And then the next chapter, he sends out these 72. That's a parallel to the patriarchs. So Jacob had 12 sons, the 12 tribes of Israel. That was the very beginnings of the nation. And then by the end of the book of Genesis, those 12 had become about 70 right before they go down to Egypt. And so the 12 tribes are expanded to 70. And then the nation of Israel goes into the incubator, which is Egypt, for food. And so like that, I think Christ is forming this new Israel that starts with his 12, and the 12 are expanding. The 12 have become 70, and his mission is on the move. He's on the road. That's my view. Let me know what you think. I don't know. That's what I think.
In the comments section, what do you think about
I'd love
Pastor
to hear
Dave's
what is
view right now?
your view on the significance of the 70 or 72.
I'm going to have to go give this some thought, Pastor Dave.
Yeah. So there you go.
All right. Well, thanks so much for sharing. Powerful message from yesterday.
What's coming up?
Coming up this week is The Road, the Jericho Road. We're talking about the parable of the Good Samaritan. We have a guest speaker coming in this week, Sydney Bowie from City Relief, and so it's going to be a pretty powerful service this week. We got a couple baptisms.
Yes, we do.
And
Free.
John is going to be doing a really interesting song at the end. So it's going to be, and we're welcoming new members.
It's going to be a great Sunday.
Action-packed service this week.
Yeah, don't miss it. This is going to be a powerful Sunday.
Boom.
And we look forward to hearing from Sydney. It might be one of the most famous parables in the Bible.
If you know anything about the Bible, you probably know about the Good Samaritan.
Yeah.
Talk about he gets us, right? That's probably what they're thinking.
Yeah.
Yeah. He's going to be here next week right there. Or maybe over here. I don't know. We're going to have Sydney here next week. And
Sydney, if you're watching, we're ready for you. Looking forward to having you share God's word with us.
There we go. All right. Well, thanks so much for being here for Behind the Pulpit. Enjoy your President's Day.
Are we sprinting or no?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, what's sprint? Sorry. I was
Tim's like, am I wrapping up the show?
I was looking at the time, thinking
or-
about the meeting I have to get to. So let's do
All right, here we
let's
go.
do a quick sprint right now.
Quick sprint. So we actually
That was a false
I wanted
start on my part.
I thought one of the questions we got was really good, and I thought it could be a really good theology sprint. So I worded it down. So for you who asked this question, you've asked a bunch before. Thank you for your questions. This is your question. Why were the disciples unable to multiply the 5 loaves and 2 fish, despite being given the power over demons and diseased by Jesus, as described in Luke 9:1-16?
Yeah, good question. I got a theory. You want me to throw it out there?
This might be time for a theory. I don't know if we could be
theology
too
theory,
dogmatic
the
about any
theory stroll.
answer. So what's your theory?
Well, I think from looking at the passage last week, I think the main thing that Luke was conveying was the idea that they were not ultimately tapping into Jesus as the power source. So Jesus is using it as a teachable moment. Do you trust me? Are you looking to me to actually accomplish the miracle, or are you trusting in yourself? Did they have the actual power to do that and perform the miracle? I don't know, but I think the main thrust of the section was ultimately to put their trust in Jesus that he could accomplish that.
And he draws out their sense of dependency, right?
Right.
He says, you give them something to eat, and he has them acknowledge their own helplessness there. And then they come back and forth to him with the baskets, and I think it's a good lesson for them to learn dependence on Christ, and it's a good lesson for those of us in ministry. And it's like everything I need for them, I get from him. And how many times did they have to go back and forth with these baskets before they got that picture? Like, oh, it's not me, it's him. I'm getting it from him, and I need it for them, and he's my supply. So it's a good lesson for them, for us too.
Interestingly, side note, there was a lot of commentators that were talking about how the feeding of the 5,000 parallels or is an image of Jesus giving his bread parallel to the Last Supper. So I didn't get weedy on that last week, but I thought that was an interesting image that people were drawing, comparative image that people were drawing.
Yeah, I mean, he's the bread of life. We remember
Exactly.
the bread from the book of Exodus, the manna from heaven. There's a lot of bread imagery in the Bible. So
Maybe
there's
that
a
should
lot
be
there.
our next church logo. Rather than a tree, will be bread.
I'll give it some thought.
We're made to multiply.
I like our
bread.
logo.
Yeah, I think I'm sticking with the tree.
There you
Good
go.
question. Thank you guys for asking those questions.
All right. You want to wrap it up since I did a false
Hey,
start?
thanks for being with us on Behind the Pulpit this week. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Check out all the other content that we have on here. Fresh Wave has some episodes dropping this week. We just had a new one out on the Bible. We got some great stuff coming in. Thank you, Tim, for all your leadership here. And we will see you guys next week with a special guest on Behind the Pulpit.
God bless.